This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to the latest episode of Doc and Jock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me, as always, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Here today to recap one of the biggest upsets in Big Ten rivalry history, talking about signing day, the future of Michigan State. Second half of the podcast, how much concern do Doc and Jock have regarding the injuries that have besieged the Detroit Lions? The NFL world is talking. They're looking at the Lions and going, my goodness, it's an infirmary ward. How are they going to handle all these injuries to one side of the football? And a player on the Lions leaked something on social media. How the hell do the Lions recover from that? Is it a big deal? What does it mean for the Packers game? That's most important. Tonight, the Lions primetime on Amazon. Or if you're local, if you're listening to this in the Metro Detroit area, thank the Doc, thank Adam, because we found out you can watch this game on Channel 2 on your television if you don't have Amazon Prime. But if you're not local, you got to get the Prime. And if you don't have it, I can pretty much surmise that you're single, because if you have Amazon and you have Amazon Prime, that's pretty much one way to keep your missus happy, especially around the holidays. But let's start, cuz, with the biggest news of the weekend in regards to college football. I told you, this one had a feel of a football game that could go Michigan's way. And here's why. And I think, Adam knows I don't really like to toot my own horn, but there's always a way to analyze X's and O's. You know which team is better. We all know which team spent more money. We all know which team went into it needing the game more. But there's a factor in sports that puts the DOC in a rarefied air, and that's the psychology of sports. Part of the reason, now, I'm not stupid. I wasn't going to go on air and say the Michigan Wolverines were going to win, but I had a feeling that just based on the fact, when you're a 20-point underdog or more, that is an easy rallying cry to say, hey, we can win. You can go out there. Look at it. Everybody's laughing at you. You can rile everybody up. When Michigan spends, basically, it's not just 365 days. They spent the last 1,250 days talking about exploring, analyzing, and figuring out how to beat Ohio State. That puts you in such an advantageous position that the Wolverines, I felt, had the psychological edge. So that's why I looked at it from the perspective of why they won. Cuz, what was your reaction to hearing that Michigan, and watching that game as it unfolded, Michigan shocked the world and beat the Ohio State Buckeyes?
It was such a mix of emotions. It was bonkers, because at certain points in this game, you were so low. Like the Davis Warren throw to the end zone that was an interception. You're like, oh man, there goes their chance. And then the final, it was the fourth down play for Ohio State, and they come up way short and don't get it. They throw the incomplete pass, and you're so excited. I just remember jumping up and down with my buddy who I was watching it with. It was like we were little kids. It was so awesome to watch and to have this experience. For me, this game is probably in recent memory, right? And I say recent, I'm 41 years old. So out of my 41 years of living, this game is probably in the top 5 Michigan-Ohio State games, just because of how much better Ohio State was supposed to be, because of how bad Michigan was supposed to be, how bad and how much this Michigan team struggled all season long, only in the end to come up the big winner. This game was awesome, and it was a lot of ebbs and flows. And there was a point where I was having a conversation with my buddy. My buddy looked at me and he was like, look, man, he's like 10-10 at the half. He's like, you told me earlier at I think it was like 3-3 or whatever. He's like, you told me earlier. He's like, you would have took that if I'd would have told you that was the score coming out of the first quarter. He said you would have took the tie, 10-10 at the half. You're taking that all day long. For Michigan to end up winning this game, and look, it was not pretty. This was a very, very ugly game. At certain points, it felt like which team wanted this less. It was awesome to watch this team win. It was awesome to get the victory. I think, you and I both kind of laid out how Michigan would have to win this game, right? We both laid it out. They're gonna have to run the football a lot to basically control time of possession, keep Ohio State off of the field, and they were going to have to play really, really strong defense up front, really limiting the run. And if Ohio State wanted to win, they were going to have to throw the ball. And I think that is where this game was won and lost. Ohio State wanted to prove something else. Ohio State wanted to prove that they were the bigger bully, and they tried to throw the ball, or they tried to run the ball instead of throwing the ball. And it's what cost them. You couldn't run on this Michigan front. This Michigan front kept penalizing you every time you tried to run the football on them. If you threw it on them, you had them all day. And for some reason, Ryan Day just gets in his own way, and he chokes. And there is definitely a Michigan problem at Ohio State. Michigan is so in Ryan Day's head right now. It was so much fun to watch as that game, again, was unfolding. Having the conversation with my buddy Scott, I was like, dude, why are they not passing? He's like, it doesn't make any sense. He's like, they should be picking apart the secondary. To me, it made no sense, Ohio State's game plan. But for me, this was a fantastic win. So excited for the W. And like I said, this win is in my top 5. This is probably number 5 for me. So this was great. This was absolutely incredible.
Because when you look at this game and you look at how Ohio State planned, if you're one of the Ohio State receivers and you are somebody that's a skill player and you look at the coaching, it was probably a coaching malfeasance to not include one of the top wideouts in the entire country in this football game. It was shocking to see that it was a game that Ohio State scored less than 20 points. It's one of those things where supporters are like, yeah, it was a coaching blunder at the highest level of errors for Ohio State. It was really, wow. It was one of those deals where when Jack Sawyer made that play late, that should have given Ohio State the momentum to move the football down the field and change right then and there. You said it perfectly. Trying to run the ball down Michigan's throat. Are you kidding me? They got a great defensive line. You should have been throwing the football 40 times. Why did Ryan Day not have confidence? Why did he try to outsmart himself? And it is one of those deals where when you can't close out games in one of those biggest moments, it's probably a choke. It's probably when they look at the film and go, man, we missed opportunities. How did Michigan win without Loveland and without, Will Johnson? It's so gross to think about.
Your 2 best players.
Yeah.
It was nuts, man. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and then you realize that, probably Ohio State didn't have the best of best quarterbacks, but it was probably you favor still Ohio State to Davis Warren, who made mistakes. Yeah.
In a heartbeat, if you were Michigan, you would take him all day long.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
Bonkers at the highest level. Now, do you agree with the committee's decision only to drop Ohio State to 6th? I think it's pretty fair. Maybe you could have said they could have fell because Michigan's unranked. You're 20-point favorite. Maybe you move them out of the top 10. Don't give them the home game as a punishment. But in the end, I do think Ohio State still has a strong chance to compete for the they can't be in the Big Ten title game. It'll be, I think, Oregon and Penn State, which I think is going to be a great game. But I think Ohio State still, when you look at it, is in the mix to have a chance to win it. Do you think that, and I know Michigan fans are all loving life, they want Ryan Day to stay at Ohio State, but he's a guy that wins double-digit games. It's just one of those deals where he can't win the big one. Maybe if they make a run in the postseason and the playoff, it can wash away the stench of a bad loss. But do you see Ohio State falling off the map? Do you think they rebound? Because this can be a galvanizing force if you're Ohio State to try and make a run in the 12-team playoff.
Here's the thing. I don't think they fall off the map, right? There's too much money there. This year they went out and they spent a fortune on their team only to get beat by this lowly Michigan team, which I think was more comical and added more fuel to the fire. I don't think they fall off the map. Too many big boosters. There's too much going on there. I could see that if Ryan Day can't get past this first round of the college football playoff, that he's gone, that they let him go. I know the buyout is huge, but Ohio State has pretty high standards. Beating Michigan is part of those high standards, and winning national championships is part of that standard. And again, they loaded up for bear this year. They invested a lot of money in their NIL deal. They went out and they recruited and brought in a lot of guys through the transfer portal, and to have this happen is just egg on the face. So I could see them maybe making a coaching change. I could see Ryan Day possibly being bought out and sent on his way. Also, Ryan Day looks absolutely miserable right now. Like, he just looks so just out of his comfort zone. And here's the thing, too. I don't think this gets talked about enough. Yeah, Michigan beats them regularly, but he struggles against competition in the top 5. He struggles against competition in the top 10. If you go back and you look at his record, it's not very good against those better teams. Yeah, he does a really good job beating up on the Iowas in the Big Ten, the Indianas, the MSUs. He does a really good job of beating up on those teams, but he doesn't do a good job against the better teams in the Big Ten. This season alone, lost to Oregon, and then he lost to Michigan. Now, look, Oregon could be a national champion, right? And last year, Michigan was a national champion. And in the year before that, Michigan was a team that everybody had penciled in to be in the finals of the college football playoff. So, yeah, he's losing to good teams. But when you can't get over the hump and you can't get the deal done, and you've got talent up and down that roster, I mean, you look at the past teams that he's had that he's lost with. You had C.J. Stroud, NFL quarterback. You had Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's a really damn good wide receiver at the NFL level. Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave. Like, you've got talented guys everywhere, and you can't get the job done. So I think depending on what happens with this first round of games, I think Ryan Day could be out. And I think Ohio State is very fortunate that they only got dropped as low as they did. I could see Ohio State getting dropped down to 10 because, again, Michigan not ranked. This Michigan team was not supposed to be good. You were not supposed to lose to them. You were a 21-point, and just before the game, I think it went up to almost a 24-point favorite, and you end up blowing the game at home. That's the other thing. Absolutely bonkers. And then it doesn't help when you have all the theatrics at the very, very end. I don't understand why players like to plant flags on artificial turf. It doesn't really work. But to have your players acting the way your players acted, and you just kind of, there's like video clips of it, him just standing by, allowing these things to just unfold and kind of unravel, to me, speaks volumes about kind of where you're at as far as a leader of those men. And you're just not doing a very good job. So I could totally see him being removed, or even him just kind of going on his merry way, because it's got to get stressful. It's got to be a lot of heat. You have now lost to these guys in back-to-back years. And it's to me, it's a mental thing for him right now. He can't get over the mental hump. So I could see them moving on from him.
Oh, yeah. So, good question regarding the flag planting. And it was wild, too, because it set the tone. It set the stage for what was a crazy weekend of rivalries and planting the flag. Look, I saw Texas. I was there at the big house when Texas planted it. It didn't look right in terms of visually because, you're playing on turf. So when you plant the flag,
it doesn't go in.
Yeah, you got in the middle of the field is stupid. You got to kind of do it in the end zone or a softer spot to plant the flag. So do I think that the college football landscape should ban it? No. Here's what should happen. All right. 1 week a year, flag planting weekend. And that's what it is. Everybody likes it. And you're allowed, and you just got to have some regulations. You got to have things, but within the realm of rules. You're allowed as a university one time where your fan base can storm the field a season. But what has to happen is it has to be timed. It has to be a situation where, okay, rivalry weekend, last week of the year, before conference playoffs, you're allowed to plant the flag. But you are not allowed, you will be fined $200K if said flag hits turf before every last member of the opposition is off the field. You got to wait. That's all you got to do. Wait 5 minutes. Everybody's hot. You celebrate, high five, hug, cry, do your WWE promo to the cameras for the television interview. Tell everybody, come to Michigan. Wait. Everybody does their interview. You dance, you cheer, you do your waves. Everybody's, probably, bucking up against each other. Then the opposition leaves. And then you plant the flag so that social media can gather it, television can gather it without the fights. Because all that's going to happen is And it should happen. Jack Sawyer earned my respect. That video was great. He's like, what the fuck? I'm not letting them plant the flag here in our house. What the fuck? So I don't mind it. It's one of those deals where you plant the flag, you're getting into a fight. But let's try to remove that because it's not a great look when you see guys, like there was some great video. I think there's some guy on the ground and there's another guy on top of him, bonks him right in the helmet. So you had fights all over the college landscape. Let the kids have fun. Ohio State's done it. Michigan's done it, but we just don't need the fights. So let everybody clear out. Then you can do your celebration. Everybody can have a good time with it, and you can move forward. But to have the fisticuffs after kind of marred the end of the game. It's always, interesting to see the fights and to see Khalil Mullings just be like, they got to learn how to lose. And for them to fight is weird after the game. It's like, well, you planted the flag, so you kind of triggered them. And there was, credit to Jason Avant, who's the hero of the day, takes the Michigan flag back and runs off as the hero of the day. He got a lot of run on social media for being a hero. But I look at it like, let the kids have fun, let them do their thing, but let's just kind of avoid the aggression. Now, moving forward, great news probably for Michigan, which is probably, it's unfortunate for Kirk Campbell, but his offense was terrible. He didn't do a great job. He gets whacked. He's fired quickly. Anybody on the radar that you like that could be the new offensive coordinator? Because you got Bryce Underwood. You're going to need a guy that's going to nurture, cater to your star quarterback, and to run an offense that looks semi like some of the teams that didn't go 7-5.
I'm not sure. I was surprised that they fired Kirk Campbell. When that news broke, I was like, are we serious right now? You just beat Ohio State. So I haven't even had really a second to digest it and to kind of figure out what they're going to do. I wouldn't be surprised if Sharon Moore ends up taking things over for a little bit, and he's the one kind of running stuff as they go into their bowl game. But I was shocked at that news. That surprised me. I was kind of blown away. Were you taken aback by that? Because look, coming off of the heels of the Ohio State game, you just beat your biggest rival. I know that offense has been putrid all season, but you just won a monster game. Is that the right time to do that? I was shocked by it. Were you just as shocked as I?
I was, not in terms of timing. I just thought that Kirk Campbell didn't do a good job. I was not surprised. I just think that
I figured it would happen at the end of the season.
Yeah, you look at it from the perspective of the offense for Michigan was predictable, it was stale, and it basically, you didn't have a passing offense. So when you neglect one side of the ball and it's completely a disaster on one side of the ball, you got to go better. So I'm curious to see what Michigan does. It's something we'll monitor, the rumors and everything going forward. Turning our attention to Michigan State, it was a little disheartening that they laid, they took a shit on the field and lost to Rutgers. But I didn't want to watch Michigan State football anymore. I was one of those people that Aiden Childs probably was mad at, didn't watch the game, didn't see a single frame of it, didn't care. I did not care. And so I reacted to the clip. And the clip was pretty damning in that, maybe he was joking and taking it lighthearted, but you can't bring up the fans in a joking way saying, well, I don't care about the fans. Well, at least the ones that stayed. Look, I get it, but here's the deal. No fan of Michigan State was happy with what we saw. The team did not get better. And he says, well, we got an attitude problem. You just kind of one of those deals where everybody probably assumed that, maybe not needed to address publicly, because my reaction is, Jonathan, Smith, your job is to get everybody to play hard. You couldn't at least lose by 7 against Rutgers at home to try to get to a bowl game? I mean, that's the easiest selling point. Our season, guys, is right now. Erase everything. The Michigan game never happened. The Ohio State game never happened. Our choke jobs never happened. Win and you go to a bowl. Didn't happen. Craziness, right?
To me, I was surprised to come out and look, I think his comments were taken out of context, right? But to come out and basically say, look, I'm not caring about the fans and next season's going to be different. Like I said, I think the comments were taken out of context a little bit, but you can't come out and you can't say that. Like, somebody's got to either give him a cue card or we talk about all the time. Athletes need to have conversations with PR people, especially before they sit down and start talking about stuff. And for you to kind of come out and just say what you said, there's going to be backlash. Like, I don't know what you're thinking. Like, Aiden Childs was the big name that was brought in. He was the guy who was brought in to help save Michigan State. He was the guy who was supposed to be the big quarterback. He's familiar with this offense. He knows what Jonathan Smith wants to do. And he comes in and really and truly, you look at his season, he was a turnover machine. He was a bigger liability on the field than just about anybody else. So to come out and say something like this at the very end of a season that was incredibly disappointing, I don't think you're allowed to do that. I don't think you're allowed to stand on that soapbox and say that. I think this is going to be a big learning experience for him, and I think next year he will be better. And I do think what he said about next season will be different. I think it will be because it has to be. Jonathan Smith can't have another year like this, and Aiden Childs most definitely can't have another year like this.
See, that's the part I don't get. What was taken out of context? I know the fan stuff. You just can't say it. But the other stuff he said was, we feel like there was not a proper attitude. Okay, whatever context that's in, maybe they're not all Jonathan Smith's players, but that's fine. What does that speak to when people say, well, it's taken out of context? Well, the words that he said were, I felt like there were players on this team that didn't bring the right attitude. Okay, so that means there's not the right attitude in that locker room.
So I'm fine with that. And I agree with you. He can say what he wants to say there. It's when you start talking about the fans, and you put the fans into it. That's the part where you're kind of walking that fine line.
Listen, the fans spoke. They didn't show up. They didn't do nothing. They left. They spoke clearly. There's nothing to talk about. He should say that. He's like, man, where were you guys? It was our biggest game. And, well, fuck, it was cold. And Michigan State Stadium sucks. It's not fun to go to. So that's why the fans acted that way. I didn't even watch the game. I didn't care. I could care less. I didn't want, actually, to be honest, I didn't even want them to go to a bowl because that team regressed. It was not a watchable team. So that part of it, you know, wasn't really the nature of my tweet at Detroit Podcast. Mine was, wait a minute. All you had to do was to get your guys up for one game. One single game. And it didn't happen. That's a problem. So I feel like when people try to mask what is being said, it's not the wrong thing. It's a culture problem. Now, it'll be solved pretty quickly because you're going to blow out those guys. Hopefully those guys go to the transfer portal. Hopefully you get guys in that have talent and figure it out. But what sucks is you would think that no matter what your situation is, when you have a chance to go to a bowl game, to extend your season, maybe get a free trip to Florida or Hawaii or California, or maybe they figured out, look, Jonathan Smith had to tell them, look, guys, if we win, we're probably going to end up at Ford Field in the Motown Bowl. So, you know, rah. And they're like, oh. All right, and then you just go out there and lay a shit, you know, take a turd out there on the field. But whatever the reason is, there was something big to play for. Development. We can practice more. We can be more together, guys. It's something that should have at least made the game more competitive. But the secondary was terrible. Not enough, you know, consistency. And hopefully Jonathan Smith can correct whatever attitude problem has been brought up by the quarterback. And Childs himself, Aiden Childs did not have really the greatest season. A lot of turnovers. Doesn't make me go, oh, let's just stave off, going out to get a transfer portal quarterback. Go get somebody else. Compete and make him earn his spot next year.
You'll get Cade McNamara.
Yeah, no.
He just entered the portal again.
Oh, God. Oh, no, I'm not doing that. I know now is probably the time where everybody's got to do the transfer portal shopping. I'm just glad on the day we're recording, Michigan State flipped somebody that was supposed to go to Alabama, but he's only a 3-star. So it's fun to see. Recruiting is all hype and perception anyway. Nobody knows what it's like until you put the pads on and you get bopped in the mouth for the first time, how you're going to handle it. I could give everybody 5 stars and make Michigan State the number 1 recruited team in the country. It doesn't mean anything until they get together and play and line up across from each other. And this year was a disaster for Jonathan Smith. But you get sort of a pass, but some of the things that would make you jump on board in administration did not happen. And at the very least, it seems like you're losing the arms race financially to Michigan. But we'll see. We'll see how this next recruiting phase, this next 7 days go when the signing period happens and everything goes down with these college teams. But man, what an end. What a different dichotomy of endings for Michigan ending on a high and Michigan State ending on the lowest of lows. But a team that is not riding a wave of negativity too much is the Detroit Lions. Finally breaking the curse of Thanksgiving, able to win, breaking a 7-game losing streak, having the Bears collapse and Matt Eberflus get fired in front of the whole world. It was crazy. As you're watching it, like the world, I'm sitting there going, all right, it's a nail biter. Man, the Bears put out some good offense so people could be. The reason why a lot more people are concerned, cuz, about the defense is the Bears just dropped the hammer on the Lions defense in the second half. They started scoring. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen getting a little bit more open, Caleb Williams finding some lanes to get into in terms of passing and moving the offense. But in the end, Bears gonna bear. They flopped when they had the football, needing a tie and a field goal to get into overtime. They had a chance. But unfortunately, Zadarius Smith gets in the backfield, sacks Caleb Williams, and then it's tick, tick, tick. And I'm sitting there going, are they going to line it up? And then what made it more energetic was the announcers going, wait a minute, what's going on there? Jim Nantz and Tony Romo are like, what's taking so long? Oh my God, this could be it. This could be disaster. And it happens. They don't call a timeout. They leave it in the chamber. And the play happens. You're like, oh God, the ball's in the air. You're like, get coverage, Arnold. And then the ball drops. You're like, whoo. And your mind goes to Lions win. But mostly you go right away. I think my mindset went to Eberflus fucked up. He's gone. That was my first thought, was like, this is the most ridiculous end of game scenario I've ever seen. This is the most mismanaged end of game scenario for a team. And hate to say it, the Schadenfreude, thankfully, cuz it wasn't the Lions. It was the Bears again. And everybody was happy, but everyone was just like in shock for a minute. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck just happened? What a way to win on Thanksgiving. But unfortunately, it cost Eberflus his job. But he was getting fired anyway. That was the staple of his administration. Good guy, but he was Jim Caldwell, Chicago. Just couldn't handle between the lines calling the game properly. Like, you're sitting there with a blank stare on your face like, what do we got to do here? Like, bro, your job, your reason why you're getting paid millions is to have your team ready. 2 plays ready. 16, 15. Oh, shit, they're not doing anything. Timeout. Call a timeout. Then just run a play, get 5, get to the end zone, get to out of bounds, and kick a field goal. But, man, that was fun and exciting knowing that the Lions won. But it was the epic choke job by Matt Eberflus on Thanksgiving. How fun was it watching that from home, seeing how disastrous that was for the Bears?
It was uncomfortable because you were like, okay, what are they doing here? 32 seconds left. They've got a timeout. You're like, they're going to call a timeout, right? They're going to call a timeout. Like, get the play off, just throw the ball, and then kick the field goal. Let's go to overtime. Like, that's what should have happened. So it was a little bit uncomfortable. But as the seconds ticked down and you got to about 5 seconds, you're like, they're not calling a timeout. The Lions are going to win this game. And you were excited. Everybody in the household was excited. Everybody else was jumping up and down. It was great. And like you said, first thing you said is Matt Eberflus is getting fired. There's no way. And then you kind of start dissecting the game, and you're just like, how the hell does this happen? Like, how did this happen where you have 32 seconds, you are generally in field goal range. Like, you could attempt a field goal from where you were at. You had 2 more downs, and you had 1 more timeout. Like, you had all the time in the world to execute at least 1 more play and then attempt a field goal. And you had enough time to where you could call a timeout. Like, if anything, Eberflus should have just called a timeout, threw a play out there, they throw the ball away, and then you just run your field goal unit out there and you kick a field goal. But it was a comedy of errors in the final half minute that led to the Lions winning this game. And it was fun to watch because it wasn't the Lions this time. Like you said, Jim Caldwell, Chicago Bears edition is what you got here. And to me, as this was going on, I thought that Caleb Williams changed the play at the line of scrimmage. That was my first thought, because there's no way you have this much confusion. There's no way that there's this much time taking off the clock and guys just either aren't set or they're not running the play. So I thought that Caleb Williams changed the play at the line of scrimmage, and I don't think Eberflus realized he had a timeout, and I don't believe Caleb Williams realized he had a timeout, because I think if they did, one of those 2 guys would have used it. Instead, they tried to get the play off, and it was going to be a Hail Mary, and they just couldn't do it. But it was nuts to see. It was awesome for the Lions to finally get this thing checked off their list, right? Like, I feel like this year and part of last year is just going through checking stuff off of the list for the Lions to exercise, and losing on Thanksgiving. This is something that they had to exercise. And you look at the way that they did it, right? They had a 16-point lead going into halftime, and they ended up giving up a bunch of points in the second half, and they had just enough to hold on. And I think what you can kind of take out of the end of that game is, with all of the injuries they have, they are going to have to play that historic style of offensive football that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. This team is going to have to now put up points because they're going to have to try to keep their defense on the sideline, and they're not going to have the firepower that they have or had on defense to sit there and try to overcome some of these other offensive units that defense is going to face. So the Lions, I think, have the ability to overcome a lot of these injuries that they sustain. Like, you lost Rodrigo in this game. You were already playing shorthanded with your secondary. Your offensive line was a little bit banged up. I think they've got you'd know better than me. I think they've got 13 guys on the defensive side of the ball on IR. Like, you have a whole starting unit just on ice right now that can't play. So how do you adjust? How do you pivot? How do you maneuver through the rest of your season as either guys get healthy or you try to work new guys in? And I think you have to lean heavily on your offense now. Do you see the Lions overcoming these injuries by kind of facilitating and changing their identity a little bit? I think this team these last couple of weeks have been a more defensive team. They've been much more stout defensively. We've been talking about Aaron Glenn and the job that he's done on the defensive side of the ball, and this team has taken on a bit of a defensive identity, whereas last year was a very offensive identity, and through early parts of the season, it's been a very offensive identity. I think at this point of the year, they're going to have to kind of switch back to that and kind of get away from that defensive identity, because I just don't think they have the firepower to maintain and hold the fort.
Yeah, time to panic, right? Bill Belichick set the alarm too.
I don't know if it's time to panic.
I think, like I said in previous interviews, 6. I'm at a 6. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 6. I liked what you said about the offense. Clearly, that's what they got to do. They got to lean on that offense. And I'll ask you, should there be a reunion with a former friend? But I'll say this. That's a lot of injuries. And I understand the mindset that people are having, like going, man, you lose all these players. NFL teams don't just go on and win. Well, this is special. Aaron Glenn is putting on a masterclass so that he can get a job, so that he can kind of peak in terms of coaching. But there's still a lot of talent on this football team. Branch, Kirby Joseph, Aleem McNeil, DJ Reader, hopefully he plays tonight against the Packers. Zadarius Smith. Teams don't set up typically with 11 guys that are all pros. So remember, guys, and remember your favorite podcaster telling you something. Okay, this is why you guys have supported us. Supported Adam Strozinski and John Macaroon for 11 years. What did we say eventually would help and help get us to the point where the Detroit Lions were consistent winners? Scheme over players. Plug and play. Where did the Lions flop all these years? They thought they could just get players. Let's just go get Trey Flowers. He had sacks. Great. Well, how does he fit in the puzzle? He fit like shit. It didn't do nothing. Scheme over players. Okay? And so that's why when everybody's going to panic, when Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson eventually leave, I feel like there's not going to be that much of a drop-off because the foundational schemes are in place. On offense, you could go to Tanner Engstrand or to Scotty Montgomery, but you have the scheme in place because it's Dan Campbell's offense. Plug and play. Winning scheme, winning mentality. Now, Jamal Adams, let's see if he can stay healthy throughout the course of the next month. Quan Alexander. But in the end, when you have elite scheme, it gives you a chance. But what you said is great in regards to, here's the tough part, okay? I don't feel like the injuries are going to be the factor that they don't win the number 1 seed. I just think the Eagles' schedule is a little better. You got Packers and Bills. There's a chance where you could play well but still not win. The Packers, it's sometimes when you catch teams. The Packers are running the football great, and you're going to rely on potentially Broderick Martin if there's an issue with DJ Reader or his snap counts go down. He's inexperienced. So the reason why the Lions are winning is not no big secret. They have a good scheme. that allows you to give up some yards within the confines of the 20, but when you're in the red zone, the defense clamps down. You got Jack Campbell in the middle. You got guys pressuring the quarterback, giving him less time to get his guys open, and you got a ball hawk there that can get the football. So this is why the Lions are 11-1. Could they take some losses? Absolutely. But it does not diminish the fact that this football team can have success. It definitely, what sucks is that you knew if everybody was healthy, we could have went 16-1, win every game in the postseason, and only had that one loss. It would have been the special season. With Hutchinson, you would have had 20 sacks. Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes. You built a Super Bowl team, and I think you can get some solace knowing Brad Holmes built a Super Bowl team. He did. He built a team that probably was the best team in the NFL in 2024. But I'm not looking at it like if they don't win it this year, that it's the end of the run. I feel like they load up again. Everybody's healthy. You bring the band back together, and you go after it one more time, and everybody's better. The offense is still going to get better. You can upgrade the offensive line, add one more stud receiver, add one or two more stud defenders. So it might be delayed gratification, but I look at it like, let's just give the Lions some credit for winning game, because Aiden Hutchinson, Alex Anzalone, Malcolm Rodriguez, Derek Barnes, Marcus Davenport, nearly a dozen guys out. And you're 11-1. I'm enjoying that. That.
Here's the thing. I disagree with you. I don't think this team can afford to lose any more games.
No, they can't. But it's just
the number one seed, I think, hangs in the balance.
Yeah.
And I think the number one seed is incredibly important for the playoffs. I think if this team is going to limp into the playoffs, they need all the help they can get. Getting that extra week of rest is a bonus. Playing at home is an extra bonus. If you're looking at teams, right, and Philly seems to have gotten things figured out in their locker room, unlike last year, Philly would have to come to Detroit and they would have to play here, and I think that gives Detroit the edge. I think if Detroit has to go to Philly, it becomes a much harder task to handle. On top of that, Detroit is playing in the best division in football right now. That is another reason why they can't lose. If you lose any ground, it's not like Minnesota and Green Bay are so far behind you where you could have a week of a slip up and you don't have to worry about these guys catching you. Minnesota's right on your heels and Green Bay is right on Minnesota's heels. This game that they've got coming up this Thursday, so important. So incredibly important. And you said the schedule is a little bit different. Well, let's look at the Lions' schedule. They've got Green Bay. That's a playoff contending team. They've got the Bills. That's a playoff contending team. That's probably a team that is penciled in for the Super Bowl. And a guy who is leading them is a guy who's penciled in for the MVP right now in Josh Allen. Then you've got the Bears again. You just seen what happened. You ended up eking a win out at home against the Bears. Can you now travel to Soldier Field and get that win? We'll find out. 49ers, you got to travel there. They're banged up. I'm not necessarily worried about them. But then you've got Minnesota waiting for you at the end of the year. So if you look at the season right now, you've got a tough game against Green Bay taking place tonight. You got a tough game against the Bills taking place next week. You then got a game where you got to travel to the Bears, which is going to be a hard out. Then you get a little bit of a rest there against the 49ers, and then you've got the Vikings. So out of your next 5 games, 4 of them are going to be difficult. Now for Philly's got to travel to the Panthers. Panthers are playing with renewed life, and they look like a different team. I think Philly should win that game. The Steelers are going to be a tough out. They're playing typical Steeler football, where it's good defense, and they're doing enough offensively to win games. That's going to be tough. The Commanders are playing out of their mind right now and look like a great team. So that, too, is going to be a tough out. And then you got the Cowboys, who at this point in the year have laid down and died. And you've got the Giants, who just got rid of their starting quarterback that they paid a bunch of money to, and they're going with Tommy Cutlets. So Philly's got 3 games out of the next 5. And honestly, you look at those last 2 weeks, you could probably rest guys' second halves of ball games. So Eagles definitely have an easier schedule as we kind of come down the trek here. But I think for the Lions, these injuries have to have you concerned. And I think these injuries are going to maybe change some of those expectations. Do you expect this team to still get the number 1 seed? This was something that we had just penciled in. We're like, yep, cool, Detroit's taking the number 1 seed, and they're going to be in the Super Bowl. Well, now with all of these injuries, like I said earlier, I think it's 13 or it's 14 guys on the defensive side of the ball alone that are on IR. The number one seed is no longer guaranteed. And I just laid out the case where I feel it is incredibly important for the number one seed. Has your expectations changed to get that number one seed? And if the expectation changes for the number one seed, is the Super Bowl still realistic with all of these injuries and with all of the firepower that you're losing?
Yeah, it's concerning. Like it's one of those deals where we all want comfort, but this football team's played well on the road. And here's the difference, because here's the problem. Don't be a creature of the moment. When the playoffs come around, Jalen Reeves-Maybin comes back. Maybe Alex Anzalone comes back. You get some reinforcements. So it may be one of those deals where you got to take the hard road, but it's not guaranteed that they're going to be eliminated. The best way to put it, when the Lions get eliminated, it'll be a tough out. Yeah, they may not get the number one seed. It might be tougher. And probably they might end up being the 5 seed. But here's a challenge. This football team has grit, and I know proverbially we're not used to seeing it, but there could be one NFL team that just turns the lights on when the playoffs come. It could be the Lions. They've won on the road. They have the vision. They have, again, outside of X's and O's and conventional wisdom, what's the psychology? Guys, we got to win this for the crew. Ben, Aaron, Dan, one last trip around the sun. This is going to be an opportunity for us to coach together for the last time. It might be, it might be it for Taylor Decker. Might be it for Frank Ragnow. You realize that there's so much intangible force that this team has to want to win, to get that stench out of their mouth from last year. Sometimes things outside of the realm of facts and X's and O's can come into play. But yeah, you're absolutely right. My confidence level that they're going to be the number one seed is a little bit lower, but it doesn't diminish my confidence they can go anywhere and win. But to me, I looked at it like even with all the talent, I thought that they were going to go to the Super Bowl and lose. But Baltimore can be.
You've been saying that since before the season even started.
Baltimore can be had. Their defense is atrocious. The team that right now
they don't have a kicker anymore.
Yeah, here's the crazy part, which is good. You might end up facing the Bills in the Super Bowl, and you get a preview. So all the mistakes you make, you fix. So we'll see. We shall see who comes back, all predicated on the injuries.
I want to get your take on Jahmyr Gibbs and the playbook board with the code words and Dan Campbell's reaction, because you were in the room when Dan Campbell basically was like, what, kind of blindsided by what he found out, and then came back the next day and kind of had to address it. Do you expect any penalties to come down for Jahmyr Gibbs? Because I could see him being benched for the first quarter because of this. Like, it was a silly mistake. It was absolutely stupid. I thought what Dan Campbell said after all of this when he was doing a radio interview was like, look, everything's on tape. We can give you the whole playbook. You still got to go stop us. It's going to be about executing.
Right.
If you figured out a couple of code words, good on you. If we can't beat that, well, then bad on us. But to me, Jahmyr Gibbs, so highly praised, so highly thought of. This, to me, is a Jameson Williams type of bonehead move. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you were to compare it to a guy who's on your roster who does silly shit, it's a JMO move.
Yeah.
Does Gibbs get punished for this? And again, what was your reaction to this breaking and then Campbell's reaction? Because I thought Campbell's reaction spoke volumes. He was completely blindsided and immediately cut that press conference short.
Yeah, it was crazy. Well, here's the thing. Nobody wants their team information out there. So, of course, he's going to be livid. But Jahmyr Gibbs is somebody that's talented and is going to be a focal point of this offense. So, no, I don't think he'll get punished. He'll get talked to. But it does lend to the question that people are going to have. Is this team disciplined enough on the field to withstand a team trying to trip them, push and shove? In the postseason, you better step up your game. Jameson Williams made a mistake, threw the football into the face of Tyreek Stevenson, took a penalty that could have been costly. How many times can you fan the flames and put yourself in a bad position? So it's one of those deals. These kids are young. Social media gets Jahmyr Gibbs, unfortunately. Had to take it down pretty fast, but it spread all over the internet, and a reporter asked about it, and Dan Campbell had to address it. But it's one of those deals where it's more of a discipline assessment than it is a big deal. I think the Lions, Jamar Jefferson, the person in the photo, he told me, if you check out Lions on SI, he's like, we change it up. So it's not going to be that impactful. Ben Johnson, if you check out his media session says that, sometimes we don't use those calls at the line of scrimmage. It's just one of those deals where you don't want any information out there and in any shape or form. It'll be buttoned up. It'll be cleaned up, but it's one of those deals where it's like you have these talented individuals. They're all learning on the job. They're all involved in social media, and sometimes there's going to be some snafus. But most importantly, they do got to tighten up their discipline on the field, taking some penalties that they shouldn't be taking, and hopefully they realize that. And the biggest moments is when it's kind of like in college. Your biggest test is the final exam. Everything up to it is a percentage, but in every syllabus I ever got, the final exam was like 40 to 60% of the grade. So you could fuck up a midterm. It would be a bad thing, but if you killed the final and you were awesome, you got an A or a B. So it's one of those deals where you can't act like that going into the postseason. It's now December. Turn the page. Don't make mistakes again. And it's a mistake. But Dan Campbell fanned the flames. If he just goes and said what he said on the radio on Saturday, we stopped talking about it. Instead, he got pissed. We're like, oh, does that mean it forced your question? It forced my question. I got one of the first no comments from Dan Campbell, which means it was a good question because my job is to ask what they don't want to talk about. But he cut me off. So if you go back and listen to Saturday's presser, I'm talking. He's like, no comment. And I just keep talking. I'm like, I at least want my question asked. So it's one of those deals where if he just goes on my question was Sunday, but if he just goes on Saturday when he first hears it, he could say, sometimes he could have paused for a minute. He said, I'm not really a fan of that, but I feel like, we're a good football team. I could just stand up here and tell you what we're going to do. We're going to run the first 15 plays. Come and stop it. Because that's what Ben Johnson said. So it was funny. My tweet was one of those deals where Ben Johnson said, like, we could tell you got a good luck and try to stop it. So I thought that Ben Johnson handled it more like Dan Campbell would, and Dan Campbell handled it like Ben Johnson. I thought it would be reversed. I thought Dan Campbell would be more lighthearted and Ben Johnson would be more stern. In fact, it was different. Ben Johnson, I asked him, I said, hey, are you still going to run Khloe Kardashian? And he started laughing. But I think at this point, the pressure's on Dan Campbell. You can start to see it a little bit. So it's a good deal for the Lions to recognize, hey, most important is the Packers. And I think they're gonna focus heavily on the game this week. Are you concerned at all with how the Packers have been playing?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with you go back and you kind of look at the first game that these guys had and the way that they were able to run the ball on you. Now you look at Detroit's defensive front, it's all banged up. It's all beat up. So you have to worry about Josh Jacobs. You've got to worry about getting pressure on Jordan Love because if you give Jordan Love time, they've got a glut of wide receivers who can beat you downfield. Your secondary is still limping into this game. So, hell yeah, I am nervous about Green Bay on Thursday Night Football. I look, if this team was just a little bit healthier, I think it'd be a little bit easier to stomach. But here's the thing. The way this team is built and the way this team is constructed, it's a lot of fun because they are so deep. They have depth everywhere, right? Like you might have a guy, you might not have any 10s, right? But you got a couple of guys who are 8s and 9s, and then you got a plethora of 7s. And those 7s can fill in for you and help out. And that's what you're looking for on the defensive side of the ball. You're looking for some of those 6s and 7s to just do their job. Just give you enough so the guys on offense and the guys on special teams, those special players that you have, those 9s, those 8s, maybe you have a 10 on offense, those guys can go out and they can perform and they can take over the game. And that's what you're looking for. All that being said, I know the Lions are at home. I think Green Bay comes into this game much more healthy than Detroit. And I think Detroit will get healthy going up against the Bills. I think they'll get some time. They'll be able to figure some more stuff out. They'll be able to get a couple of guys back next week. But I think this week, talking about a bit of a quicker turnaround, I just don't think you have enough in the tank. And I think this is where you hit a bit of a stumbling block. And I think it's going to be an incredibly close game. I think the Lions end up losing it 23-21. But I just think the injuries catch up to you a little bit here. I think Green Bay comes in with just a little bit more health and a little bit more pop. I think this team is coming in with some tired legs, and I think it's going to catch them now.
Oh, listen, to me, the key is going to be stopping Jacobs. I think that if you make I think you just load up. I say that you gamble and you say the new guys, Adams and the combination of Nowatzki and Campbell, load up the box, extra couple guys in the box, and you count on your defensive backs to, whenever a catch is made, limit the yards after the catch, and you force Jordan Love to be one-dimensional, period. And you count on your offense to pick it up a little bit. It's going to be a close game, but maybe one in which they do drop it, but it's going to be competitive. Not, the Lions have been showcasing that they can make plays late, but I'm confident. How confident are you that it's going to be a good game?
Oh, I think it's going to be a great game. I think this is going to be, this is a huge rivalry game, right? I think this is going to be a lot of fun, and I think it's going to be a contrasting of styles, right? Like Josh Jacobs, incredibly good running back. I think it's going to be a challenge for this defense and for whatever this revamped defense is going to look like to go out there and stop him. Offensively, look, Green Bay has a pretty solid defense, right? Like, they're pretty good. And it's going to be a challenge for Jared Goff. It's going to be a challenge for Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, and it's going to be a challenge for Amon-Ra St. Brown to put points up on the board. This game is going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a close game. I think this is going to be a bit of a playoff test here. I really do believe that, because Green Bay is coming in. They need the win. Detroit needs the win to get some distance, but Green Bay really needs the win to close in on Detroit. And Detroit needs this W to add to the tiebreakers and to get another big division win. So if they do have a bit of a slip up against, say, Minnesota later in the year, they've kind of got this in their back pocket. But I think this is going to be a great game. There's so much on the line in this game. It is a game that can help decide the NFC North, and it's a game that can help decide playoff seeding. So it's a monster game. I think it's going to be a fantastic game.
Yeah, I can't wait. I know it sucks that the Lions didn't get the 10 days after Thanksgiving, but I think the extra couple days for the Bills preparation will be key. So I'm excited for the game. I think it's going to come down to the wire, but here's the thing. In a game in which you look at it and you have two teams that are close, the battle of the quarterbacks. I think if Jared Goff outperforms Jordan Love and the team that gets the most turnovers wins this game, it's going to be the Lions. And guess what? It's going to be a battle. 27-27 going to overtime, and that flip of the coin is going to go. Tails never fails. Lions win the coin toss, go down, and score that touchdown 34-27 to make everybody back, get them back on the bandwagon, or 33, because you don't need the extra point once you score the touchdown. 33-27 will be the final score. The Detroit Lions end up being 12-1, and you can kind of rest and have that opportunity. Lions in prime time. It's going to be fun, cuz. Pay attention. Pay attention to David Montgomery. Always likes to shine against the Green Bay Packers. Darius Smith clearly has the added motivation, his former squad. And this offense, count on the offense and just buckle up defense. But we shall see. We shall see how it plays out. But it's an 11-1 team. Enjoy the ride, and we'll see how everything shakes out. But continue to follow Detroit Sports Podcast. Continue to follow us on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. Make sure that you get all your information from the inside. We're there. We bring it to you all free. The podcast, the articles, the videos. You want to learn about Jamal Adams, Quan Alexander, videos on the Lions on SI website. It's all there, free and free for your entertainment, so that you can be informed and have some knowledge as you talk with your friends about the Detroit Lions. I can't wait to fire it up next week on the next episode of Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.